The Now Sports Center will be giving you guys our College Game Day location predictions for the 2024 college football season. The new season is rapidly approaching, and so today we'll be predicting where the College Game Day crew is headed for each week of this upcoming season. This should give you a pretty good idea as to some of the biggest matchups coming up here in 2024 and what to expect with the new season right around the corner. So with that, let's get started. Looking at week 0, we got Florida State and Georgia Tech. This is confirmed, so we do know the Game Day crew is headed to this one in Dublin, and honestly, this could be actually a halfway decent matchup. I mean, some might look at this matchup and think Florida State's going to blow out Georgia Tech in this one, but that might not be the case. I honestly think Georgia Tech could be a potential ACC dark horse this season. I'm not saying they're going to be like a top team in the conference and win the conference. I really don't expect that, but this could be a solid 6-8 win team in 2024 and maybe make some noise in the ACC. So for Florida State, obviously coming off of such a disappointing finish to last season, I mean, they're going to come out on fire, I would imagine. But Georgia Tech is definitely a sneaky team not to overlook. So a fun matchup in week 0. Moving on to week 1, we got North Dakota State and Colorado. This is on the Thursday night before week 1. So pretty much opening night of the season. And it's unconfirmed whether the Game Day crew is headed to a matchup on the first Thursday night. But if they did, almost certainly would be in Boulder. Colorado, just the story of them being a pretty loud team overall. I feel like they're going to be improved in 2024. Could definitely see the Buffs going to a bowl game this season, although they do have a very tricky schedule, and it starts in week 1, taking on FCS powerhouse North Dakota State. I mean, the Bison have really they've given FBS teams troubles in years past, so this is not a given. This is not a guaranteed win for Colorado by any means, so definitely an interesting one coming up here in week 1. A fun one for the first Thursday night for sure. And then your actual week 1 matchup, this is also confirmed, Notre Dame and Texas A&M in College Station. Notre Dame is, honestly, I feel like both teams could be fringe college football playoff contenders. Notre Dame last season, they were a bit disappointing. I don't know if they quite lived up to a few expectations that many had. But this season with Riley Leonard, I feel like this is going to be a pretty strong team overall, a pretty balanced team overall. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. And Notre Dame also has a very manageable schedule this season as well. This, you could argue, this is their toughest game on their schedule, and it comes in week 1 on the road at Texas A&M. So, I mean, for Notre Dame, I feel like this is definitely a team I could see right around 9 or 10 in the college football playoff. Texas A&M's got a really tough schedule. I mean, I feel like they'll be improved in 2024. They've been such a disappointment in recent years, so having a new era, new head coach, there's some optimism, I think, for Texas A&M and a huge opportunity in week 1 for sure. Week 2, this is where none of these matchups are confirmed from here on out, but Texas-Michigan really makes sense for week 2. I mean, there's really only 2 matchups. I would say this one and then Colorado and Nebraska. But this is definitely the matchup between the 2 best teams in week 2, Texas and Quinn Ewers. I would not be surprised if Texas won the Natty this season. This is a talented enough team to do it. It's just a matter of if they can make a run in the college football playoff and get there. Obviously, that's something you have to consider now because it's not just a 14 playoff. It's a 12 team now. So a lot more teams get into the college football playoff, but obviously it makes it a bit more difficult. But for the Longhorns, I would not be surprised once again. This is a talented enough team. Quinn Ewers coming back. They were the 3 in the college football playoff last season. They could have won it last season. They just fell short to Washington in the Sugar Bowl. But then you got Michigan, defending champs. Michigan, a lot of people are kind of counting Michigan out. I mean, it makes sense. It's a much different team in 2024. Harbaugh off to the NFL. Just a much different team in 2024 in Michigan. But this is not a team to sleep on. I feel like many are sleeping on Michigan right now. This is still going to be a very good football team in 2024, and they got this game at home. I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan, I mean, this might come as a surprise to some, but if Michigan won it just because everyone expects Texas to be so good. But, I mean, this will be a fun one in week 2 for sure in the Big House. Colorado, Nebraska, the other notable game, is mainly for the storyline, the old rivalry. Nebraska's been kind of a loud team with Raiola, second year of Matt Rule, and then Colorado, obviously, with Coach Prime. I mean, they were a really strong team last September, it seemed, before things kind of fell apart. So two really interesting teams there between Colorado and Nebraska. That's the main reason they go to Lincoln. You also got Tennessee, NC State, Iowa State, and Iowa for two good matchups also in week 2. Week 3, we got Georgia and Kentucky. This game's in Lexington. Kentucky really doesn't have big expectations for 2024. Georgia sure does. I mean, it makes sense. I really could see Georgia making a run for another national title. That's going to be a team that I think is going to they'll have a chip on their shoulder based on the ending of 2023 as well. Everyone talks about how disappointing the ending of the season was for Florida State. How about Georgia, though? If Georgia was in the top 4, as they definitely could have been, I really wouldn't have been surprised if Georgia topped Michigan and everybody else and won another national championship. But it's still a good matchup. You got the storyline of Carson Beck versus Vandegrift, who transferred to Kentucky. Former Georgia quarterback. So interesting storylines, a strong SEC matchup as well. And then you got Alabama, Wisconsin also in this week. Same with Oregon, Oregon State, and then LSU and South Carolina. Week 4, we got Utah and Oklahoma State and Stillwater, two of your top teams in the Big 12 this season. I would not be surprised if this was your matchup for the Big 12 championship game. Utah and Cam Rising, they are no joke in 2024. I feel like some are sleeping on them. Maybe same as Oklahoma State, honestly. I feel like the Cowboys and Ollie Gordon, who's a huge standout, he's probably the best back in the country. Looking forward to 2024. So, I mean, this one seems especially interesting. Week 4's got a couple of good matchups. Tennessee, Oklahoma also there. The first SEC matchup for Oklahoma. NC State, Clemson's also a pretty good ACC game, but this one just seems like a fun game for week 4. Utah and Oklahoma State. Pretty big matchup too. Got some big implications early on in the season. Week 5, we got Georgia and Alabama and Tuscaloosa. We really don't see these two teams play much in the regular season. It's typically once they get to the SEC championship when we see them. And obviously last season, I mean, Georgia's going to have a chip on their shoulder in this matchup after how the SEC title game went last season. And Alabama, obviously Kalen DeBoer, new era for them. I mean, this is a huge early season test for Alabama especially. Honestly, for both teams, I would say. Georgia's in, I would say, a better position looking forward to 2024. And Alabama's kind of, I would say, I mean, you got Georgia and Texas in the SEC. Those are the two teams, and you could say the top tier of the conference. Alabama, I would say, is in the second tier of the conference as of now. You could put them like with Ole Miss and Tennessee. Ole Miss is a fringe tier 1 team as well in the conference, but I mean, this is a huge opportunity for Alabama. Got this game at home against a really strong Georgia team, but at the same time, I mean, Bulldogs and just the storyline of this matchup is going to be huge. So I feel like this is almost a guarantee for week 5. You also got Oklahoma State and Kansas State, OU and Auburn, and then also Arizona and Utah. But I feel like no matchup really compares to this one for week 5. Week 6, we got an ACC matchup, Clemson, Florida State. Two of your top teams, I would say, in the ACC this season. And it's going to be in Tallahassee, which Florida State, obviously, after such a disappointing finish to last season, I think them having this game at home against a strong Clemson team, a pretty big opportunity for Florida State. I mean, they might be my favorite for the ACC. I feel like Clemson's up there as well. Florida State's going to be strong. Miami's going to be strong as well. So I would say those are probably your big 3 in the ACC. But I mean, this game could go a long way for Florida State to maybe make it into the college football playoff this season and even make a redemption run and finally try to win a national championship once again. You also got Iowa and Ohio State in this same week. Ohio State's obviously going to be a really strong team. I can see Iowa being kind of a fringe college football playoff contender as well. Really strong defensive team. It's just a matter of whether or not their offense can finally get it together. You also got Michigan and Washington, a rematch of the Big Ten title game. Don't really think the Huskies are on the same level in 2024 versus 2023. That's kind of a popular opinion. I think Washington will still be good. Maybe a 7 or 8 win, maybe 9 win team in 2024. Just they're not going to be the same. So I don't see this game day being in Seattle. You also got Mizzou and Texas A&M, which also should be a pretty strong SEC matchup. Week 7, Ohio State and Oregon, the two top teams in the Big Ten, I would say. Especially, I mean, these are two good-looking football teams. I mean, Oregon, Dylan Gabriel coming back. That's going to be a really strong Oregon team. A really fun team to watch, too. They're going to be experienced off of 2023. I mean, if they're going to win a national championship, this is a really good year to do it if you're Oregon. So, I mean, also having this game at home against Ohio State, this is probably, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if these two teams met again for the Big Ten title. But Oregon having this game at home, it's going to be one of the best games, I would say, of this college football season. An incredible matchup between two really good teams. You also got Texas-Oklahoma, first Red River rivalry matchup of the two SEC teams now, and then Ole Miss and LSU, Penn State, USC also in week 7. But I feel like this one really, I mean, this one leads by a considerable amount. I think both teams could definitely be undefeated heading into this one. Week 8, we got Georgia and Texas, big SEC matchup. I feel like these two teams are, I mean, there's like 4 teams that I would say are really in a strong position to win the college football playoff. Georgia and Texas are definitely 2 of them. I would say I would also put Oregon in there, and then either Ole Miss or Ohio State. One of those 2 teams fills the 4th spot. But these 2 teams especially really stand out to me. And Georgia, I mean, coming off of last season, you're going to see them. I mean, they've already appeared, this is their 3rd time in this video already. So it makes sense. Georgia has a really difficult schedule. They're going to be a really strong team in 2024. And they've got a lot of really difficult road games. This could be where Georgia loses one on the road at Texas, a brutal place to play, especially when they're a really good football team. So this will be a big one for week 8. You also got Alabama and Tennessee. That's a huge SEC matchup between 2 strong teams in the SEC. Reason why I picked Georgia, Texas is because I feel like Alabama and Tennessee are kind of in that 2nd tier in the SEC. Georgia, Texas are in that 1st tier. So it makes sense for them to go to this matchup for sure, I would say. You also got Auburn, Mizzou, and Kansas State and West Virginia. Week 9, we got Kansas and K-State, a strong Big 12 matchup, a pretty good rivalry matchup as well. This is kind of a week where it's a total toss-up. I mean, it kind of depends on who's playing the best going into week 9. I mean, Florida State-Miami is a pretty big ACC matchup. I wouldn't be surprised if they went to Miami. Mizzou, Alabama could be a big matchup. Nebraska, Ohio State as well. There's also Oklahoma, Ole Miss. So this is one of those weeks where you kind of have to wait and see once we get a bit closer to it. But if they did KU and K-State just kind of for fun, I really wouldn't be surprised. A really good rivalry matchup, 2 strong teams. I think Kansas could be maybe an 8 or 9 win team, I think, in 2024. K-State maybe a little bit better. So still it'd be a really good matchup and a fun one for sure for week 9. But once again, Florida State, Miami might be the matchup between the 2 best teams. It's just a matter of what the game day crew ends up doing. Week 10, we got Ohio State and Penn State. Penn State's one of those teams that, I mean, the last couple of years, they've quietly been a really strong team. They just have been overshadowed by Michigan and Ohio State in the Big Ten East. And so that's why they just haven't had that same attention. But obviously, I mean, having a 12-team playoff, I think, especially benefits Penn State, being a team that just hasn't gotten over the hump of Ohio State and Michigan. Could they finally do it this season? That's a possibility. I still feel like many are sleeping on Penn State, and Drew Aller's a strong quarterback. They'll be a strong team once again in 2024, and they've got some big opportunities. Like, this is a huge chance. Having a home game against Ohio State in Week 10, a massive chance for them. But if Penn State gets in the college football playoff, I wouldn't be surprised if that's one of those sneaky dark horse teams that maybe makes a run. But you also got Oregon and Michigan in this same week, also a huge matchup in the Big Ten. I mean, this is a huge week for the Big Ten. USC, Washington could be a big one. Kentucky, Tennessee is probably your biggest matchup in the SEC. And even at the point in Week 10, I probably wouldn't say Kentucky is going to be very good. So this is especially a really strong week for the Big Ten. Week 11, we got Alabama and LSU. This is a really big week for the SEC. You got Georgia, Ole Miss also in this same week. I mean, it could be Georgia, Ole Miss just as easily as I think it'll be Alabama, LSU. It's also one of those toss-up weeks. But this one is just, I mean, it's just such a big rivalry matchup. Georgia, Ole Miss is going to be between 2 really good teams, but it's not quite as big of a rivalry. So that's kind of what gives this matchup, I think, the edge in Week 11, and they head to Baton Rouge. But 2 strong teams in the SEC for sure. You also got Florida State and Notre Dame. That could be a big matchup as well. Notre Dame should be playing pretty well, I think, by Week 11, and Florida State is one of those fringe teams as well. You also got Washington and Penn State. That's going to be the whiteout game for Penn State this season, so keep an eye on that one as well. Week 12, Tennessee and Georgia. This is where they finally make it to Athens. I mean, Georgia's going to be on game day a lot this season. I really wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I've already got them Georgia, Kentucky, Georgia, Alabama, Georgia, Texas. So I've got them at going on the road for 3 college game days. It could potentially be 4. So I do think they make it to Athens for this one. Tennessee being also a strong SEC team. I feel like Yamaleeva in there, that's going to be a strong offense and a pretty good team in 2024. I don't think they're quite on the same level as Georgia or even Texas, but I would say Tennessee is still a team to keep an eye on. You also got Utah and Colorado, just in case maybe the Crew wants to go to Boulder just because of how loud of a team they are, but also, I mean, it really just depends on how good they are. If Colorado's a good team, I expect Utah to be good. So if Colorado's a strong team in Week 12, I really wouldn't be surprised if they went to Boulder instead. But you also got Oregon, Wisconsin, Nebraska, USC in this same week. So not a super deep week of action, but a couple of really good matchups. Week 13, Washington State and Oregon State. This is not the best matchup of Week 13, but this is where I think the Crew gives some attention to the 2 lost Pac-12 teams, Washington State and Oregon State. I mean, 2 teams that just completely got left behind after the complete fallout of the Pac-12 this past season. So I think they go to Corvallis for this one. This would be a fun one, a huge rivalry matchup. It would be a really fun one that makes sense for them to go to. Texas A&M Auburn's also in this week. That could be a big SEC matchup. Texas Tech, Oklahoma State. I could see Texas Tech being a dark horse in the Big 12. So that's also a possibility. Same with Alabama, Oklahoma. But, I mean, the Crew usually goes to either an FCS matchup or kind of a matchup just for fun, despite it not being the best matchup of the week. I think this is where they do it in Week 13. And, I mean, these 2 teams still could be bowl teams in 2024. So I'm not saying they'll be bad. But it's definitely a matchup worth keeping an eye on, a strong rivalry matchup as well. And then Week 14, we got Michigan, Ohio State. I mean, I just feel like you can't go against this one. I considered for a time doing Texas and Texas A&M. I mean, it's going to be a lot of fun seeing that rivalry once again up and going in the SEC. But, I mean, until one of these 2 teams falls off, you got to pick it. Michigan, Ohio State in Columbus this season. I feel like Michigan is still going to be a 10 or 11 win team this season, still a strong team. Ohio State's a team that really has the pressure in 2024, much more so than Michigan. Wolverines have won 3 straight against Ohio State, so a lot of really interesting storylines going into this one. And Ohio State being a team that's been so talented and just hasn't been in the college football playoff in recent years. I mean, this is really where, I mean, it's going to be make or break time for Ohio State. If they win this matchup, they go to the Big Ten title game for a chance at one of the top 4 seeds in the college football playoff. Regardless, both of these teams could definitely make it in the 12-team playoff this season. But with that wraps it up for my game day predictions. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on these predictions, especially let me know what you would change. This is one of those videos where you could change a lot around. So let me know your thoughts, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. My name's Evan, this is All Sports Central. Stay tuned for more. We'll catch you on the next one.